They thought it would be just another freedom of navigation patrol. On an April morning in 2025, the USS William P. Lawrence, a guided missile destroyer, slices through the South China Sea. The seas are calm, the skies clear, but the tension is palpable. Then China speaks up. Not just words, but a sharp statement from the PLA's Southern Theater Command. "We see you and we're not happy." The Chinese military announces it has deployed naval and air forces to shadow and warn the American destroyer. State media floods with updates, leaked footage, and radar tracks. The message is unmistakable. You're not welcome here. But the U.S. response? Radio silence. No press briefings, no social media posts, just the Lawrence holding her course unflinching. What China calls a provocation, the U.S. Navy calls routine. But this was no ordinary Tuesday. That destroyer wasn't just asserting freedom of navigation. It was sailing into waters Beijing claims as its own, a move that could escalate from rhetoric to conflict in moments. So, what really happened out there? A near miss, a warning shot, or something more? Behind the headlines and official statements, a game of cat and missile unfolded, and someone blinked. The Lawrence didn't flinch. While Beijing's headlines screamed of illegal trespassing and serious provocations, the destroyer stayed on course, not an inch off its planned path. No evasive maneuvers, just a steady glide through the South China Sea, where international law says she belongs. The silent message was clear: we don't ask permission. To the U.S. Navy, this wasn't escalation. It was business as usual. Freedom of navigation operations are standard in contested waters, a way to draw invisible lines in the sea and dare anyone to challenge them. The South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, U.S. destroyers have passed through them all, calmly, legally, and deliberately. The Lawrence wasn't alone. As she moved through the South China Sea, she didn't broadcast her presence but didn't hide it either. Her radar signature was clean, her AIS beacon off, but military satellites overhead fed live data to the Pentagon. Eyes in the sky, ears under the water, and likely a Virginia-class submarine nearby, gliding silently beneath the waves. You don't sail into contested waters without backup. China knew it. Within hours, Chinese media released grainy drone footage of a planned Type 052D destroyer tailing the U.S. ship at a distance. Reports claimed J-16 fighters buzzed the area. Close, but not close enough to provoke a response. PLA pilots love to push boundaries, but there's a line and everyone knows it. One wrong move, a jet too close, a ship blocking the Lawrence's path, and things could go sideways fast. The rules of engagement in the South China Sea are finely tuned but fragile. A single misread maneuver, one errant radar lock, and the Aegis combat system could go hot. If that happens, China isn't the only one watching. This isn't just about the South China Sea. It's about who controls international waters without needing a hall pass. The Lawrence completed her transit in under 12 hours, no incident, no deviation. But the silence wasn't peace. It was pressure building. The next move was already in motion. As the Lawrence vanished into the Pacific haze, another pressure point flared. Hundreds of miles away, near the Spratly Islands, warships were on the move. The Philippines and the U.S. launched Exercise Balikatan, their largest joint drill yet. 14,000 troops, dozens of ships, fighter jets, missile batteries, and amphibious assault rehearsals. The timing, no coincidence. Hours after China announced it had shadowed the U.S. destroyer, U.S. Marines were unloading HIMARS rocket systems onto a Philippine beach. A show of force and a message to Beijing. We're not just sailing through, we're building firing positions nearby. China had flexed its muscles days earlier. A carrier strike group led by the Shandong, one of the PLA Navy's most advanced carriers, cruised near the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, sending a jolt through Manila. Air patrols and radar sweeps followed immediately. The message: we can flank you, but the Philippines didn't back down. While the PLA released propaganda footage of their intercept, U.S. Pacific Command compiled ISR data from satellites, drones, and vessels. Every maneuver, flyover, and tailing ship was logged and filed. Behind the Pentagon's polite statements, a quiet question lingered in planning rooms from Okinawa to Guam. How far will China go this time? If this wasn't a war game, if this was the prelude to something bigger, every destroyer transit, joint drill, and carrier deployment wasn't just deterrence, it was rehearsal. Steel was moving fast across the sea. Beijing didn't blink, but it didn't stay quiet either. As the Lawrence exited the South China Sea, the PLA's Southern Theater Command issued a sharper statement, accusing the U.S. of illegal, provocative, and irresponsible actions. State media anchors in Navy uniforms warned of hostile infiltration, calling the transit a dangerous show of muscle meant to disrupt peace. But behind the rhetoric was a colder truth. China was angry not just that a U.S. warship sailed through, but that it did so without asking. In Beijing's view, the South China Sea isn't international. It's theirs, a domestic corridor. For years, they've pushed to convince the world that freedom of navigation doesn't apply, that Western warships need permission. But international law, including UNCLOS, which China signed, says the South China Sea is an international waterway. The U.S. treats it like any other global highway. This clash isn't just semantics, it's doctrine. If the world accepts China's claim, every transit becomes a diplomatic chip. But if the U.S. keeps sailing through unapologetic, Beijing's narrative erodes. And right now, the U.S. isn't just sailing. It's doing so while allies drill live-fire exercises and ISR platforms map China's coastline. That's counter-pressure. While Beijing showcased J-16s on combat patrols and warships shadowing U.S. destroyers, the reality was less cinematic, more strategic. China was reacting to the transit, the drills, the idea that its coastline was a window, not a wall. The South China Sea stayed calm, but the region was watching. Not with speeches, but with satellites and sonar, the kind of scrutiny reserved for when something bigger looms. The Lawrence's transit didn't redraw the map, it shifted the tone. In Beijing, the PLA rotated assets faster, frigates left docks, aerial patrols spiked, even civilian ferries reported radar interference, possibly from airborne early warning systems hunting U.S. subs. On the U.S. side, Strike Group 5 kept moving. The Lawrence rejoined the USS Carl Vinson, steaming east with an escort of steel and constant vigilance. P-8 Poseidons scanned for missile signatures or coordinated swarms. Taiwan quietly upped its defense posture. More ROCAF jet flights, hotter logistics hubs, increased traffic to bunkers. Everyone was preparing. Before China assumed the U.S. was risk-averse, that a loud warning would cause hesitation. But the Lawrence didn't hesitate. Its clinical professionalism said one thing: we're not asking. If that becomes the norm, China's gray zone tactics and strategic slicing start to unravel. Beijing knows this. That's why the propaganda was loud, the flyovers edgy, the destroyer-tailing footage looped on state media as if to say, we're still in control. But control isn't tailing a ship. It's shaping what it does next. Right now, the U.S. Navy is shaping the region's movement. This wasn't just a standoff, it was a stress test. The U.S. tested China's willingness to escalate, how far the PLA would go before blinking. The South China Sea, long a flashpoint, didn't erupt, but the seams showed. Spikes in comms chatter, odd deployments, cyber probes on U.S. and allied systems. Beijing was rattled, not panicked, but enough to check its playbook. That playbook assumed time was on China's side, that the U.S. would tire, Taiwan would feel isolated, and alliances would drift. But every transit, every drill like Balikatan, adds teeth to a regional shield. The Pacific is getting sharper, less predictable. One wrong blip, one nervous pilot, one mistimed maneuver, that's all it would take. Suddenly, we're not talking routine transits, but flashpoints, after-action reports. War. This wasn't just a message between destroyers, it was a message to the world. The lines are being redrawn and the erasers are moving fast. One destroyer, one contested sea, one message sent without a shot. Don't mistake the quiet for calm. The South China Sea is a stage, a pressure valve, a test site for deterrence. Everyone's watching to see who blinks next because the next incident might not come with a warning or a press release. This was about tempo, initiative, showing the U.S. Navy sails where it wants, when it wants, without checking with Beijing. So, what do you think? Are these operations necessary to keep the peace, or are we one step from something irreversible? Let us know in the comments. If you want to support the channel, join the fleet for loyalty badges, priority replies, and help us bring more naval stories to light. Click join on our channel page and step aboard. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and remember, sometimes peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of steel.